welcome to Virtualize Everything, where we strive to educate and inform the viewer about technology and technology-related topics around the world of virtualization. Before we get started, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to help Virtualize Everything bring more virtualization content to YouTube. Also, consider visiting our web store at store.virtualizeeverything.com. Alright, let's continue on with the video. So, tonight's video presentation is going to be about installing ProxmoxVE. Yes, you're thinking we've done that. It's kind of overdone right now. But tonight we're actually going to be doing that on top of a bare Debian server install instead of using the Proxmox ISO. Now, this isn't the suggested technique for installing most Proxmox servers, but if you're using some type of custom drive configuration, or maybe you want some compiled drivers that aren't provided with the Proxmox install, for example, wireless drivers, it may be easier just to install Debian and then install Proxmox on top of that. So, with that, we have a bare Debian install. If you don't know how to do that, consider checking out our videos. We've made one on doing just that. And now let's open the console and log in. I'm just going to find out the IP address of this particular install. This may not be the best way to do it, and eventually by the end of this install, this is going to be a static IP address. But for now, I have this install set up as a DHCP install because most of the time my templates don't have a known IP address when I build them. Alright, so now that we know the IP address, we can begin by SSHing into this particular install. And let's go ahead and move over to the root user. su root and enter our root password. So now that we're using the VM as a root user, we can go ahead and exit out of this. We won't need it anymore. So now I'm going to begin by copying and pasting some commands for my notes, but I'll explain to you what each command does to the best of my ability. So the first thing we're going to need to do is start by editing the host's file. To do that, we're going to type in nano and the path to the host file, etc hosts. Then we're going to come in here and we're going to replace this with the IP address of our VM. And really, this shouldn't be a VM at this point. You should be on bare metal. So now we can press Ctrl X and Y to save and enter. So now that's done, we can use the host name --IP--address command to make sure this is working correctly. And you can see it returns our IP address. Alright, so now we need to add a repository to our repositories list so that our system can communicate with Proxmox to get all the packages that it needs. This is the command we're going to use. This command will be provided for you in the comments section below, most likely in a write-up at virtualizeeverything.com. We can press enter. That is now loaded into our sources.list file. Now we need to add the key so that Proxmox knows that we're communicating with it. So we can do that by using this command here and pressing enter. There we go. Now let's do a full update and upgrade by entering apt update and apt full upgrade. This will bring the packages up to the most up-to-date version or the package that Proxmox intends on us using. Let's press enter. We're going to say Y for yes. Now it's time to install ProxmoxVE itself. We're going to use apt install proxmox-ve space postfix space open iSCSI and press enter. Again, say yes. And we're local. Okay. Now I'd also like to take a moment to mention, you may be seeing the value of 2 gigs of RAM on my screen. Now this is for the VM that we're using to demonstrate this installation process. You should never try to use Proxmox with 2 gigs of RAM. When you're doing virtualization and even containerization, RAM is king. You want to make sure you have RAM and cores to support your projects. Alright, so now that we're done installing Proxmox, postfix, and open iSCSI, we can now remove the OS prober. OS prober is something that is set up for dual boot, and it'll cause problems now that we're running Proxmox. We're going to use the command apt remove OS prober. And let's do a reboot. If anybody knows why when I enter the reboot command, Debian refuses to reboot and says it's not found. I did a quick couple of DuckDuckGo searches and found out that this command should work. If anybody knows, please consider dropping a comment. Maybe I'm doing something wrong or being stupid. Who knows? Part of using Linux is about learning every day. So now we should be able to go to a web browser and enter HTTPS IP address to our server and then port 8006. So it appears I made a mistake. Let's go back and fix that now. So in this host folder, I entered the IP address as 43 and not 47. There we go. Click Advanced and proceed. Login should be root and the root user password. So there's a working version of ProxmoxVE. Of course, as always, there's a few things we should do. The first one for our server is go to repositories, and if we're not using enterprise, we should make sure we highlight this, disable, and then go in and make sure we add the no subscription. Now, the other thing that we need to do is actually change some network configurations. So you'll notice here that we have no bridge or anything else. So let's go create bridge. We're going to call this VMBR0. We're going to give it the IP address of our system, making sure to add our CID at the end of 24. And our port for this looks like ENS18. We can see our port name right here. And create. Now, just to make sure everything's looking good, this is an output of our network configuration, network interfaces file, and it does look correct after hand entering this many times. But just to make sure everything's working correctly, let's go ahead and reboot the server. And we should be able to press refresh here, and everything is working correctly. As always, I hope you enjoyed tonight's video presentation and have found it useful for your projects, or at least informative. Consider dropping us a comment, liking, sharing, subscribing, and clicking the bell notification to always stay up to date with new virtualization content from Virtualize Everything. As always, have a good night.